All right, so you've decided you wanted to buy a new house in the Phoenix area. Question is, what comes next? You've made the decision, yes, you want it. You've gone and done some research to find out all the pitfalls that you might fall into and how to avoid them. But now you're actually ready to go. What does that mean? Well, what are the steps? Well, in this video, we're going to take a look at the 8 most commonly found steps in the process of buying a new home. We'll explore in detail each one of those steps so that you have a pretty good idea of what you're getting into. And it'll also keep you well informed about what's about to happen so that you have a real good idea on how to prepare for it and how to make your home buying process as most smooth as possible. When does that start? It gets started right now. All right, so if this is the first time to our channel, make sure you click the like and subscribe button to make sure you keep all the updates coming from this channel to your desktop. My name is Mark Phillips, and on behalf of everyone at eXp Realty, I can tell you that each and every week we get calls from people just like you, all looking for information on how to buy homes in the Phoenix metropolitan area, and I tell you, we just love it. So if you have any questions, shoot us a text, send us an email, give us a call. We'll be happy to help you and make your move or move within the Phoenix area the very most smooth possible. All right, so let's get started. What is this purpose of this video? Well, as I mentioned, we're going to get into, you've already made a decision, yes, you want to buy a house. Okay, so now what happens? You're going to figure out that there's a lot of moving parts. What's the first one? Well, we talked about some of the things you want to keep an eye out for, but aside from that, you're ready to get started. So the first thing you're going to want to do is obviously start to look for homes. Now, what is that going to mean? Well, you could just start poking around, but I can tell you at any given moment, there's probably, let's say 13 to 20,000 properties on the market for sale in the Phoenix metropolitan area at any given time. So that's a lot of properties to kind of wade through. So it's best to kind of figure out what it is you're looking for. And what I mean to say is start to think about, well, how big a house do you want? Now, maybe you don't know the square footage. You don't have a concept of what 1,500 square feet looks like, or 2,000 or 2,500. Okay, that'll be for a subject. We'll get to that in just a moment. The second thing, you probably do have an idea of the number of bedrooms and the number of bathrooms that you want. One thing I will say, when you start, at least at this point, start looking at the number of bedrooms and bathrooms kind of as at a minimum. And let the maximum kind of float at this point, because you kind of figure, what can I not do without? Okay, so it's kind of a want versus a need thing. So starting with bedrooms and bathrooms. Next thing you want to take a look at is how much yard do you want? Do you want a lot of yard? Do you want a little yard? Again, the square footage, if you don't know the answer to that, we'll take a look at that in just a moment. But that's the kind of thing you want to have, how much room do you need to have in the backyard? Do you want to have a pool? And the thing with the question that you want to ask with a pool is it a need to have, or is it a nice to have? In other words, would you want to have a pool? And is the home that you're looking at, if it doesn't have a pool, you're not going to consider it. Again, things that you want to think about. What else you want to think about? Well, things like a fireplace. Things like, do you want it to be a 2-story or a single story? Again, if you can, at the front end at least, leave your options as open as possible, because you may not know what you don't know, and how would you know it? Right? So you may be thinking, you know what? I don't want a 2-story home because I don't want to hike stairs. Well, if that's a deal breaker for you, then that's what it should be. Then you'll restrict your search to just single level homes. But if it's a possibility, then leave it open, because it'll give you a lot more opportunities to look for homes and give you a lot more variety when you take a look at all those things. Okay? So all of those things. Take a look in the house hunting. Now, I kind of alluded a moment ago to what if you don't know what you don't know. Specifically things like square footage, both in the home as well as the square footage of the lot. Well, those two things you don't really have a mental picture of, especially if you're living in an apartment. A lot of apartments are anywhere between 500 feet and 1,200 square feet. Okay, is that what you're going to want in a new house? Well, maybe, maybe not. The key here is, and the answer to all of these, is to get with a trusted realtor. A realtor, a smart one, like myself and members of my team, we will take you out into the field and show you several different homes. Again, just to get your feet wet. Not that you're going to buy those, not that you're going to have to choose any one of those, but just to get an idea of what 1,700 square foot looks like. What does 2,000 square feet look like? And more important than that, the lot specification. Again, do you want a big lot, a little lot? Well, you might not know what that means. Okay, it's like trying to buy something, is it large? Well, what size is large? Okay, so going out into the field, you'll get an idea of the lots that most homes in the Phoenix area represent. Now, for the most part, homes range from, let's say, a 5,000 square foot lot range all the way up to, let's say, 12 to 13,000 square feet. That's normal. Again, there are some smaller, some bigger, but that's generally what you're going to be looking for in what typically most people want in the metropolitan Phoenix area. Okay, so house hunting is the number one thing you want to keep in mind and take a look at to get your thing started. Work with a realtor to help you answer those questions that you don't know the answer to or how to answer them. And with that, we'll get into step 2 in just a minute. All right, so you've looked all over town, working with your realtor. You've figured out what part of town you want to be in. You've looked at a number of homes. You finally decided, okay, we found the one that we really, really like enough. Now we want to write an offer. How do you write the offer, and what are the moving parts within that? Well, I can tell you this is another important area where working with the realtor who's been around the block a few times will help you through this process. They'll explain all the documents to you. There's a lot of advisories. There's a lot of things that you need to sign, but a good realtor will walk you through all of those things and make sure that you're comfortable knowing what you're all going to be signing and what you're offering. Now, this video, we're going to focus primarily on the purchase contract. There are a lot of other ancillary disclosures and things like that. We'll talk about those later on. But for right now, the offer is going to be a formal document where it particularly states the property, the buyer, the seller, and all the real estate agents that are involved in the process. It'll involve finding out when we make the offer, the numbers. The numbers are going to be the purchase price, the amount of earnest money, the down payment, and the final thing, or the final amount that they can expect. It'll also detail what kind of purchase it is. Is it a cash purchase, or what type of financing it will be it FHA, Federal Housing Authority, USDA, or maybe a VA loan. Okay, you have to disclose that. Other things in the process. We will also give them a response time to our offer. Now, typically, at least in my team, and it's what I've always done, and I think it's a relatively common thing, is to give the seller a 24-hour response to your offer. You don't want to leave it open-ended, and you don't want to go too many days because, again, another offer could come in, or you just want to make sure once you make the offer, you kind of want to know as soon as possible, and 24 hours is a reasonable amount of time for them to consider what you're offering and to give you a response, be it an acceptance of your offer or what's known as a counteroffer. They say, yes, I like all the things in your offer except these items. If the counteroffer is received, then you decide upon the items that they have countered. And if those are acceptable to you, you sign off on it and you have an accepted contract. If you don't, then you can cancel, or you can basically offer another counter and go back and forth until you have a meeting of the minds, or you agree to part ways. Now, the other thing that you will be putting into your offer is going to be at least something to consider, and this is another area where you want to talk about with your realtor, is asking the seller to help you as the buyer pay for some of your closing costs. And that's done on the concession line in the contract. So you can either do it by percentage, as a percentage of the purchase price, or you can put it in as a hard target number. I recommend just putting it in as a percentage. But basically, you're asking the seller to basically credit you as the buyer a certain percentage of the purchase price for you to use in any way that you want. Now, one thing I will also recommend, make sure that you look at the wording of how they offer or accept the concessions. If you put it into your offer, they accept it as written, you're good to go. But sometimes they'll counter out and say, we will offer you concessions. In other words, the seller will give the buyer certain dollar amounts to be used, but then they will restrict what those things are used for. And anything not used for that, you may have extra expenses, but if they're not on that list, those dollars go back to the seller if you didn't use them for those specific things. So make sure that you know what the wording is so that you can make sure to get that properly written. And make sure, again, a meeting of the minds. The biggest thing with real estate, I want to make sure everybody is just understanding what the other side wants and has accepted, as well as our team as well. So everybody understands, we're good to go. And the last thing on the offer process the offer document rather, the purchase contract, is the close of escrow date. Now, the close of escrow date will be offered with the contract. Okay, it's not carved in stone, but you want to give them, you've given them a 24-hour response time to responding saying yes or no to the contract, but then you also want to tell them when do you expect to close escrow? When do you expect to buy the home and close? Typically, it's between 30 and 45 days. I will tell you that sellers will consider offers in more favorable terms if the close date is a shorter window. In other words, if you keep more towards the 30 days, then go 45 or greater. The main reason being, the best offer in the world is the one that's going to close. And the faster that happens, it's better for the seller. So having a longer close, it's not to say that it won't be accepted, but at the same time, if you're in a competing offer situation where you're in against multiple other offers, that's certainly going to be something that they will look at and not necessarily look favorably on, especially if you've got a competitor for the same home willing to offer a shorter close of escrow. Okay, so 30 to 45 days, something to think about. All right, so these have been all the things related to the purchase contract. And again, there are a lot of other documents. Those will be the topic of other videos, but that's been the purchase contract. What comes next? Well, let's find out. Okay, so you've gone and found your house. You've made the purchase offer, gone through the negotiations, and you've come to a meeting of the minds. And so you have an accepted contract. You now start into the first of your processes, and that is, the first one is the due diligence process. Now, by contract, generally speaking, it's a 10-day process. It can be more or less if you change it, but in the way the standard contracts in Arizona are written, 10 days is the number. Okay, so with that 10 days, that is the time for you to do what I would consider kicking the tires. You go out and spend time in the neighborhood, walk the neighborhood, meet the neighbors. I would also recommend that you go and visit the neighborhood at morning, in the afternoon, and the evening as well, so you get a feel for the vibe of the neighborhood. You know, is it really loud after dark, or is it, you know, is very comfortable? Again, whatever the answers are, you want to know so that you can make your best decision. Alongside of that, in fact, the most important piece of this, and this your realtor will have usually a go-to team that they have. We certainly do here on our team, but I've got several, and that is the actual home inspector. So you're going to want to have the home inspected. Unless you are a contractor and know how to do that, I would highly recommend getting an expert in there and having them basically kick the tires in a more robust way for you. That is an upfront expense that you will have to pay the inspector yourself, and frankly, you want to. You don't want the seller to be paying for that expense. It's going to run anywhere between $300 to $500 generally, and that will be out-of-pocket paid at the time of inspection. The inspector will get out there and they will go through the home with a fine-tooth comb. They'll be looking in the roof, in the attic, they'll be looking at the floor, they'll be looking all over the things from side to side. And their biggest thing is, one, are the things working in the home as they were designed to work? And two, to point out any specific things that you may want to be paying more attention to. Now, I say they're going to you're paying them to point these things out. They are not specialists, okay? Your home inspector is not a specialist in, let's say, roofing, or he's not a pool guy, or he's not an AC guy. He is a generalist inspector. So he's going to see, okay, if there's some noise coming out of the pool pump, he's going to mention that to you and also recommend that you get a qualified pool guy out there. And that's why you want to have, in the 10-day inspection period, you want to have that inspection happen in the first couple, 3 days, if at all possible, so that you can still have time in the rest of the inspection period to get those specifics, or those experts in that particular field, the specialists out there to do extra work if need be. Okay, so that's the inspection period. Another thing that you're going to want to also do, and this is an added expense as well, it's about $50 to $75, and that is to have a termite inspection, and basically a bug inspection. Now, it's important to do that, and I will say that homes are either going to have them or not. If you're in an area that is known to have scorpions, then you're going to find evidence of scorpions. And it's best to just know about it so that you can make the decision. And then what it comes down to, let's say the home has evidence of termites. He's going to take a look and give you a real good idea of how bad the problem is. And most places that do have termites, if they do, they have been treated and have been a problem of the past. But again, that's the thing that you want to know. And if there is evidence of termites, that's another negotiation item that we can put in to when we talk about the what we do with the inspection, and that comes into our next tip. So all the good things with inspections, again, kick the tires, walk the neighborhood, get an idea of what's going on in the neighborhood, have your inspector out there and get the kicking the tires in a very real way and figure out what you're going to do. What happens after that? Well, let's find out. All right, so we've had the house inspected. Now what? Well, the inspector is going to, when he finishes or she finishes their inspection, they're going to provide both the realtor as well as you, the buyer, with a report, and it's a rather robust report. They'll give you the robust, fully detailed report with pictures and everything else. They'll also going to give you a summary or a cover sheet. And in that cover, and that's where you're going to see the red, yellow, green kind of items. And just kind of a bullet list of all the things. And if you want more detail, and you will want more detail, you can go to the bulk report that comes with it as well. Now, what to do with that report? Well, you basically, as a buyer, you have the right to not only have the place inspected, but then once you get those list of items, and I will say this, that any home is going to have a list of items. It could be a new home, it could be 100 years old. They're going to have items, I guarantee it. That every home that I've ever seen always has something. It really boils down to is how severe are the issues. Some are not severe at all, some are major, so it just depends on the home. Not to be afraid, just to be knowledgeable, so that way you can make your best decision. Okay, so we've got the inspection report in hand. We got the red, yellow, green items. We, being the buyer and the realtor, will talk about what to ask the seller to repair or replace. We'll go through that list and we'll write down those items and we'll submit. It's a formal document submitted to the seller, and it's called the BINSR, the Buyer's Inspection Seller's Response Form. We're giving the buyer a certain amount of time to go through the list and decide what they would like to fix or not of the things that we want them to fix. Now, I mentioned they have the option to say, yeah, they'll fix all of them. They have the option to say, I'm not fixing any of them. Or what most likely happens is one of two things. They'll say, I'll fix some of them. Or even easier, let's say there's a number of items on there, but they don't really feel like fixing any of them, either by expense or time or whatever. They oftentimes will offer a credit at closing to the buyer. Now, one thing to keep in mind, if they say, yes, I'm going to fix everything, great. We'll re-look at the property later on in the process. We'll talk about that in a moment. Let's say they agree to fix some of the things, or they just say, you know what, we're not going to fix any of these things. We'll just give you a credit at closing in lieu of those repairs. Make sure the wording of that credit. Okay, it's important to make sure you have your realtor go through that and make sure that you have the ability to use those dollars in any way that you want, much like we talked about with the seller's concessions. Make sure that the credit in lieu of repairs can be used for anything that you want as the buyer. Don't allow the seller to restrict those things, because if it comes down to, again, if you want to use it for something else, the contract is going to be what drives what your ability is to do. Okay, so all of those things are in place. That's what to do with the inspection through the BINSR. Once you get the BINSR back signed and dated, then we move on with the rest of the process, and let's get forward to that right now. Okay, we've got the place inspected. We've got the BINSR working. They've agreed to fix some of the things, and we're good to go with what they said. So we're on with the contract. What's next? Well, throughout the rest of it, between now and the end of the close of escrow, you've got some time. And this is where the buyer and the realtor really don't have a whole many things to do, because this is the time between the end of the inspection period and the close of escrow. This is when the title company is going to do their work. They're going to be doing their deep dive, their process to go through and make sure that the seller has the legal right to sell the property and all the things that they do. It'll also be a time when the insurance company, or excuse me, your lender will go and do their deep dive, their underwriting. So while that's happening, this is the time that you have a minute to go through and look for insurance. Now, at close of escrow, you will be required, usually by your lender, but certainly you want it anyways, because it is a big investment. You want to have the house insured. So this is the time to go and look and shop for insurance. So make sure you get that done. And just like I mentioned in another video, it's important to make sure that you get replacement value insurance. Okay, don't let them depreciate all your premiums and what you paid for. So let's say down the road you need it, they depreciate it, you don't have enough to do what you need to do to repair the home. That's not what you want. Replacement value is the ticket. Okay, so make sure you use that time to go after the right insurance. Okay, we've made it this far. We've gone through the inspection, we're past that. We've now got insurance lined up, we're good to go. What's next? Well, as I mentioned, between the end of the inspection period and the close of escrow, there's not a lot of things that we need to do as the buyer and the realtor, but there's a lot of things going on by the other parts of the team, specifically the title people, as I mentioned, and the lenders doing their underwriting. Now, during the process of underwriting, what's also going to happen, the bank knows that you have negotiated for this home. They know what the purchase price that you've agreed upon, but they also know that they're going to be putting up a lion's share of the money minus your down payment. Okay, so they're going to be at risk there. They want to make sure that their risk is going to be covered. And what that means is they're going to require an appraisal. Now, the appraisal is ordered by the lender, but it's paid for by the buyer. Okay, so typically the appraisal, just to give you a ballpark number, it could be a little bit more, a little bit less, but usually it's around $500. Some lenders offer credits and incentives to use their lending organization, and sometimes they'll offer a credit for that. Now, typically you're still going to have to pay for it up front, but you'll get a credit for it at close. So ask your lender if that's a possibility, see all the different things that they might be able to offer you. Now, they're going to go through and they're going to do their appraisal. Okay, what happens when that appraisal comes back? One of three things can happen. Okay, the appraiser is going to know what your home has been agreed to. Let's say it's $400,000. He's going to know that $400,000 is the price. He's going to try to shoot toward that. In other words, he's going to try to justify a $400,000 appraisal. Okay, so if he goes and does that work, then let's say it comes in at value at $400,000, then we're good to go. If the appraisal comes back, let's say at $405,000. Even better, you just as a buyer stepped into $5,000 in equity. That's a good thing. The question comes up, what happens when it comes in less than appraisal? It does happen. Let's say it comes in at $395,000. All right, well, we've agreed to $400,000. That's what the seller wants, and that's what we've agreed. But the bank is only going to lend their percentages based on a $395,000 appraisal value. So there's a $5,000 difference that we now need to negotiate with the seller to work through. Now, the first line of defense, at least for me and my team, is we usually go to the seller and say, look, it's appraised at $5,000 less. We want to adjust the purchase price down, and we want the new purchase price to be $395,000. If the seller's willing, they agree, we're good to go, and we move on. If they disagree, then we, again, further negotiate. Oftentimes, if there is a negotiation to be had, then oftentimes what happens is we offer to split the difference. So you would say, okay, the purchase price to be $397,500, and then we go on from there. The thing that you want to know about negotiating in this particular flavor is anything above what the bank has agreed to. In other words, they are going to lend on appraised value. So that extra $5,000, or in this case, split between buyer and seller at $2,500 each, that dollar amount by the buyer has to be paid for in cash. So whatever you go into negotiate, realize that that's going to be an extra out-of-pocket expense that you're going to have to come up with. Okay, so make sure that you know that so that you're armed with the proper negotiation strategies so you can make your best decision. Once that's decided upon, we agree on how the appraisal is to be treated, and we adjust the purchase price as necessary. We've completed the next process or the next phase of the negotiation, and we're ready to move on to the next one. All right, so we've made it all the way through. We've got the house discovered. We're starting to really like it. Don't fall in love with it. You remember that. You don't want to fall in love until after the close of escrow. But you found the house. We've made an offer, got an accepted offer on it. We've gone through the inspection. We've gone through and gotten the seller to agree to fix or credit us for the repairs that we'd like them to make. We've gone through and gotten our insurance. We have then gone in and gotten all the appraisal items out of the way. So we're pretty much smooth on into closing. Basically, we're waiting for the title company to finish up their work. We're waiting for the lender to do their final underwriting and get us ready to close. What do we need to do? Well, we as the buyer and the realtor will do something called a pre-closing walkthrough, sometimes also called a final walkthrough. And what that means is 3 to 5 days ahead of the close of escrow, we're going to meet at the property. You and I will go and we will walk through the home. The purpose is twofold. The first purpose of it is if there were any bins or related items, in other words, any items that the seller said that they would fix or replace, it's our responsibility to go and make sure that those things were fixed or replaced. Okay, so we established, yes, they did what they said they were going to do, so we're good to go there. The next, and really the main purpose of the final walkthrough, is to walk through and verify that the house is essentially in the same condition it was when we went under contract. It is not to inspect the property. You can do that if you want to. In fact, with some of the major repairs, if there were major bins or repairs, let's say the roof needed a lot of work and the seller said, yes, we'll fix it, I would highly recommend getting a roofer out there to verify that it was done and done properly. But that being said, the final walkthrough is primarily just to make sure that it is in materially the same condition as it was when we went under contract. Okay, so that's 3 to 5 days out. We'll go through and get those things done. And then once we get to that point, we're smooth on into the final phase of the process, and that is the close of escrow. Okay, guys, we've made it this far. We're down into the home stretch, gone through all the inspections. Everything is good to go. We've received our notifications from the lender that we're good to close. ready to close, and we're all set. Now the title company is going to be driving the show. They will get with you, and they will tell you, they'll give you an instruction sheet in terms of basically where to go and when to go for signatures, because you're going to have to go in and sign all the final documents that they need. You're then going to be told in terms of how much you're going to need to bring to closing in the form of either cashier's check or wire transfer. They'll give you wiring instructions. And as we mentioned in several other videos, and I'll bring it up in this one, wire fraud is real. Okay, there are people out there that spoof all kinds of things from title companies, getting you to wire your money to a place it wasn't supposed to go. So when you do get those wiring instructions, contact your title person, and you will already have all that information under a separate cover. Don't use the email that was sent to you, because that could be part of the spoof. Call them with the number that you know and talk to the title person and ask, hey, did you send this, and are these instructions correct? Because you don't want to be spending, the entire of your down payment. If you wire it to the wrong place, you're out of luck, and that's a big problem. So you don't want that to happen to you. So you'll get the wiring instruction, you get all that done. You arrange the time for signing, and if need be, they can arrange a mobile notary to bring the papers to you if that's a requirement or something you need to have happen. That can be done. But ultimately, all of those kinds of things are going to be buttoned up in that process. In fact, ahead of that process, they're also going to give you what's known as a settlement sheet. Now, up until, in all during the process, if you'd like a settlement sheet, ask your realtor or title company to give you it's basically going to be an estimated settlement sheet, but it'll give you all the costs related to the transaction on both sides, and it'll also give you a real good idea of what you're going to need to bring in cash to closing. As we get closer, they'll give you the final settlement statement, and that's exactly the number that you're going to need to bring so that you have every idea of what to bring. You'll take all those documents in, and you'll make a happy close. You'll sign all the documents, and we're good to go. What happens after that? Well, all the papers are in. This is all happening the week prior to closing. I typically set my closings on Wednesdays just to give us a couple of days ahead of time to get everything done. And if there's any hiccups or anything like that and we need to delay the closing for any reason, we've got a couple of days without having to go into the weekend. So there's a number of benefits to doing it on Wednesday. Let's say everything is flying 5 by 5. Okay, so we got everything good to go. Wednesday's approaching. All the paperwork's been signed, both buyer and seller. Everything is good. We're clear to close. Everything is in place. What happens the day of close? The day of close, very important day, but it's all basically done by the title people and final things with the lender. We, as the realtor and the buyer and the seller too, for that matter, we just sit and wait for that wonderful thing, and we find out that we have been recorded. Okay, they will submit all the documents in the morning, provided they've got everything ahead of time. They'll submit the documents to the county, and that document can be, the title is basically in the name of the seller beforehand, and then after the transaction of the close of escrow, it'll be transferred to the buyer. Now, once that's done, that's a matter of recordation. Once we get that notice of recordation, that's when we can present you with the keys, and you can that's when it's your house. You've moved in, you've successfully gotten to this point, and everybody's happy. Okay, so now that recordation notice, sometimes it happens very quickly. Sometimes it goes right up to the edge of 5 o'clock. It just depends. It depends on how busy they are at the recording office, and it depends on a great many other factors. Where was the paperwork and how fast it got to them. I will say, in fact, this happened just about 2 weeks ago. I had one of our buyers, and seller didn't get their final documents to title until the day of closing. And they got it in at 4:30 p.m. and we still closed and recorded by 5. So it was very possible. It was a little bit of a nail biter at the end, but we were able to get it done and close on time. So all good things. I thank you for walking through this process with me. Again, my name is Mark Phillips. I'm with eXp Realty. If you have any questions about this process or any other related to real estate, either stay tuned to this channel. You can get with me. My contact information is in the comments below. And I wish you a very good day. Make it great.